My name is Claudette, and I'm 67 years old. After retiring from nursing, I now live alone in my two-story home in Boston. I've always had a special bond with my only son Matthew and his wife Sarah. When they mentioned a dream vacation to Hawaii, I gladly contributed my retirement savings to make it happen. But when I arrived at the airport with my luggage, everything changed. Matthew pulled me aside and said, "You're not coming with us." Then Sarah whispered, "We'll finally have a vacation without this old man." Before I tell you what happened when they returned home, tell me where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button to support my journey. I became a widow when Matthew was just 8 years old. His father, Jack, died suddenly from a heart attack, leaving me to raise our son alone. Those early years were incredibly difficult, but I was determined to give Matthew everything he needed to succeed in life. I worked double shifts at the hospital, often coming home exhausted, but still making time to help with homework and attend school events. We didn't have much, but I made sure Matthew never felt deprived. When Matthew graduated from college, I couldn't have been prouder. All those years of sacrifice had paid off. He secured a good job in marketing and eventually met Sarah. They seemed perfect together at first. She was ambitious and charming, working as an account executive at an advertising firm. When they married 7 years ago, I thought our family was complete. 5 years ago, when Matthew and Sarah were looking to buy their first house, they fell in love with a beautiful colonial in a good school district, but they were short on the down payment. Without hesitation, I offered them $50,000 from my retirement fund. I remember Matthew's grateful hug and his promise that they'd pay me back someday, though I told him it wasn't necessary. After 40 years as a nurse, I had managed to save a decent nest egg, though not extravagant by any means. I live modestly in the same house where Matthew grew up, carefully budgeting my retirement income. I clip coupons, shop sales, and rarely indulge in luxuries. Every extra penny usually went toward helping Matthew's family or saving for emergencies. Last September, Matthew called me with excitement in his voice. "Mom, we've been thinking about taking a family trip to Hawaii over Christmas. It would be great for all of us, including you. You've never had a real vacation, and we think you deserve it." I was surprised and deeply touched. I'd always dreamed of seeing Hawaii with its beautiful beaches and lush landscapes. The thought of experiencing it with my son, daughter-in-law, and especially my 10-year-old grandson Lucas was thrilling. "That sounds wonderful," I told him already, imagining walks on the beach with Lucas building sandcastles and collecting shells. When Matthew mentioned the cost, I immediately offered to pay. "Consider it my Christmas gift to all of you," I said. The total came to $12,000 for flights, a beachfront condo, and activities. It was a substantial amount, but seeing their joy would be worth every penny. Over the next few months, I threw myself into research. I looked up child-friendly activities for Lucas, quiet beaches where I could relax with my arthritis, and restaurants that would accommodate everyone's preferences. I even bought new clothes, suitable for the tropical climate, something I rarely did for myself. The night before our departure, I called Matthew to confirm what time he'd pick me up for our early morning flight. When he didn't answer, I left a voicemail. "Hi, honey, just checking what time you'll be here tomorrow. I'm all packed and ready to go. Call me back when you can." He never returned my call, but I assumed he was busy with last-minute preparations. When Matthew still hadn't called by morning, I started to worry. Our flight was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and it was already 7. After trying his phone several more times with no answer, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called a taxi and loaded my carefully packed suitcase into the trunk. "Going somewhere nice?" the driver asked, noticing my floral shirt and sun hat. "Hawaii with my family," I replied proudly. "My first real vacation in 20 years. The airport was crowded with holiday travelers, everyone rushing to their destinations with excited faces. I paid the driver and wheeled my luggage through the sliding doors, scanning the check-in area for my family. That's when I spotted them. Matthew, Sarah, and Lucas already standing in line at the airline counter. Relief washed over me as I approached. "There you are. I was worried when you didn't pick me up," I called out, waving. Their reactions confused me. Matthew's face paled. Sarah's mouth tightened into a thin line, and even little Lucas looked uncomfortable. There was a moment of awkward silence before Matthew stepped out of line and pulled me aside. "Mom," he said, his voice low and strained, "what are you doing here?" I laughed nervously. "What do you mean I'm here for our flight to Hawaii? Didn't you get my messages?" Matthew ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was about to confess something. I thought you understood. When we talked about this trip, we assumed you knew you weren't actually coming with us. The words hit me like a physical blow. But you said it would be great for all of us, including me. I paid for everything. Yes, for us to go, as a gift, he explained, avoiding my eyes. We thought you were helping us have a family vacation. Behind him, I could see Sarah watching us, her arms crossed. She leaned toward Matthew and whispered something, but I heard it clearly. Tell her to go home. We'll finally have a vacation without this old man. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and hurt. People around us were starting to stare. My throat tightened as I fought to maintain my composure. I see, I misunderstood, I managed to say, though my voice cracked. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have been clearer, Matthew said, but his apology felt hollow. Lucas stepped forward, looking confused. Isn't Grandma coming with us? He asked innocently. Sarah quickly put her hand on his shoulder. No, honey. Grandma has other plans. She just came to see us off. Other plans. The lie stung almost as much as the rejection. I stood there in the busy terminal, surrounded by happy travelers, feeling completely alone. The new sun hat I'd bought specially for the trip suddenly felt ridiculous on my head. You should go enjoy your vacation, I said, fighting back tears. Don't worry about me. I turned and walked away before they could see me cry, dragging my suitcase behind me like a burden. Outside, I hailed another taxi, this time giving my home address. That was quick, the driver commented. Change of plans? You could say that, I replied, staring out the window as tears rolled down my cheeks. The return trip felt eternal. When I finally arrived home, I paid the driver and went inside my empty house. Christmas decorations I'd put up before packing now seemed to mock me. I sat in my living room, surrounded by photos of Matthew growing up. His first day of school, graduation, wedding day. In each picture, I stood beside him, smiling proudly. Now I wondered if I'd been fooling myself all these years about what our relationship really meant to him. Christmas Day was the loneliest I'd ever experienced. Several friends called to invite me to their celebrations, but I couldn't bear to explain what had happened. How could I tell them my own son had taken my money and left me behind? Instead, I let the calls go to voicemail and spent the day in my robe watching old movies and picking at a microwave dinner. As the days passed, my initial shock gave way to a deeper examination of my relationship with Matthew and Sarah. Looking back, I began to notice a pattern I'd been too blind to see. When they first married, Sarah had been warm and engaging, often inviting me for dinner or calling to chat. But over time, those invitations became less frequent and our interactions more superficial. I thought about how Sarah subtly controlled my access to Lucas. He's busy with activities, she'd say when I asked to see him. We're focusing on family time this weekend. I'd always respected their boundaries, believing I was being a considerate mother-in-law. Then, there were the financial contributions. Beyond the house down payment, there had been Lucas's private school tuition when they were temporarily short the new car they needed after their old one broke down, and countless smaller expenses I'd covered without question. Each time, Matthew had expressed gratitude, but there was never any discussion of repayment or reciprocation. One afternoon, while organizing my closet to distract myself, I found a box of Matthew's childhood mementos. Inside was a journal he'd kept in middle school. I hesitated before opening it, feeling like I was invading his privacy, but my need for connection overrode my conscience. Mom worked double shifts again this week, 13-year-old Matthew had written. She looked so tired, but she still helped me with my science project. When I grow up, I want to take care of her like she takes care of me. The words brought fresh tears to my eyes. What had happened to that thoughtful boy? That evening, I broke my self-imposed isolation and checked social media. Matthew had been posting daily updates from Hawaii. There they were, smiling on beaches, at luau's, and swimming with dolphins. Just the three of us, perfect family vacation, read one caption beneath a sunset photo. Not a single mention of me or any acknowledgement that I had made it all possible. As I scrolled through their holiday paradise, anger began to replace my hurt. I'd spent my life putting Matthew first, sacrificing my own needs and desires for his benefit, and this was how he repaid me, by excluding me and allowing his wife to dismiss me as this old man. The next day, I called my oldest friend Judith, who had known Matthew since he was a baby. Unlike me, she saw the situation with clarity. "Claudette, honey, they're taking advantage of you," she said bluntly, "and they'll keep doing it as long as you let them." "But he's my son," I protested weakly. "Yes, and you raised him to be responsible and kind. If he's not behaving that way, that's on him, not you. It's time you stood up for yourself." Her words resonated with something that had been building inside me. I'd spent my entire adult life being the giver, the supporter, the one who could always be counted on to help. But at 67 years old, what had it gotten me? A son who took my money and excluded me from the family I'd sacrificed everything for. As I hung up the phone, I knew something needed to change in our relationship. The question was, did I have the courage to make that change? 2 days before their scheduled return, Matthew sent a text, landing. "Thursday at 8 p.m., can you make your special lasagna for Friday dinner? We'll be exhausted from the trip." No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just another expectation that I would be there to serve their needs. The message crystallized everything that had been wrong with our relationship. I spent that day thinking about boundaries and respect. While looking for some tax documents in my home office, I discovered that Matthew and Sarah had been using my basement to store furniture and belongings without asking. Boxes of their old clothes, Sarah's college furniture, even holiday decorations they didn't have room for. They had treated my home like a free storage unit. Even more disturbing was what I found while organizing my financial papers. A loan document Matthew had asked me to co-sign 2 years ago for home renovations had actually been for a luxury SUV, the same vehicle they'd driven to the airport while leaving me behind. He had leveraged the house I helped them buy for a status symbol while misleading me about the purpose. That afternoon, I called Thomas, our family lawyer, who had been a friend of my late husband. After explaining the situation, I asked about my legal options. "Claudette, I'm sorry they've treated you this way," Thomas said, genuine concern in his voice. "Jack would be disappointed in Matthew's behavior. Legally, the money for the vacation would be considered a gift, unless you had a written agreement, but the house is another matter." Thomas explained that since I had contributed substantially to the down payment without formal documentation, we could potentially establish a constructive trust. However, he cautioned that legal action would likely destroy my relationship with my son. "I don't want to punish Matthew," I clarified. "I just want him to understand there are consequences for treating people this way, especially family who love him." "Then perhaps what you need isn't a legal solution but a life lesson," Thomas suggested. "Sometimes the most effective teaching comes from natural consequences." That conversation sparked an idea. I didn't want to harm Matthew or his family, but I needed to establish clear boundaries. By evening, I had developed a plan that would teach responsibility while protecting my relationship with Lucas and leaving the door open for reconciliation. First, I called a locksmith and explained that I needed all the locks changed on my house. The kind, older gentleman arrived within an hour. "Family troubles?" he asked sympathetically as he worked. "Just establishing some new boundaries," I replied. Next, I spent hours packing up all of Matthew and Sarah's belongings from my basement and spare rooms. Each box represented years of one-sided giving. As I sealed the final container, I felt lighter, unburdened. Finally, I sat at my dining room table and wrote a detailed letter explaining my decision. I wanted Matthew to understand this wasn't about punishment or revenge, but about self-respect and mutual responsibility. The words flowed easily, and for the first time since the airport incident, I felt truly empowered. The next morning, I called another locksmith to change the locks on a small rental property I owned across town. It was currently vacant, having been recently renovated between tenants. I made arrangements for the utilities to remain on for 3 months. After the locksmith left, I installed a doorbell camera system I'd purchased online. The young man at the electronics store had been extremely helpful in selecting something easy to use. "Just download this app to your phone," he'd explained, "and you'll be able to see and hear anyone who comes to your door." My next stop was the bank, where I revoked Matthew's access to my accounts. Years ago, I'd added him as an authorized user, just in case, but that privilege had clearly been taken for granted. "We can also set up automatic payments for your bills," the bank manager suggested. "That way, no one needs access to your accounts but you." That afternoon, I met with my financial advisor to ensure my retirement funds and investments were secure. We discussed updating my will and establishing a trust for Lucas that would be managed by a third party until he reached adulthood. It sounds like you're taking control of your finances, she observed. That's always a positive step. Better late than never, I replied with a small smile. Between these practical matters, I scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specialized in family relationships. Dr. Collins helped me understand that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish or vindictive. It was healthy and necessary. Many parents of your generation were taught that self-sacrifice is the only way to show love, she explained. But true love includes mutual respect and reciprocity. As their return date approached, I prepared a special package. Inside a decorative box, I placed my letter along with a collection of photos showing Matthew growing up. I included pictures of us together during difficult times, studying late for his exams, celebrating small victories, supporting each other through life's challenges. I wanted him to remember the values I'd raised him with before material comfort and Sarah's influence had changed him. Alongside these memory triggers, I placed a key to the rental property with an address tag and 3 months' worth of paid rent receipts. It was a safety net, not a punishment, a way to give them time to reflect and adjust without creating hardship. The process of letting go of enabling behavior was emotional. I'd defined myself as Matthew's supporter for so long that establishing independence felt almost like losing my identity. But with each decisive action, I reconnected with the strong woman I'd been while raising him alone. I reached out to friends I'd neglected while prioritizing Matthew's family. Many were going through similar situations with adult children, and their understanding provided comfort. I joined a book club, scheduled regular coffee dates, and even signed up for a painting class I'd always been interested in. On the day of their return, I checked their flight status online. When I confirmed they'd landed, I placed my carefully prepared package on the doorstep of my home, took a deep breath, and drove to a hotel where I'd booked a room for the night. I wanted physical and emotional distance from their initial reaction. From my phone, I watched through the doorbell camera as they would discover the consequences of their actions. At 9:15 that evening, my phone alerted me to movement at my front door. Through the camera, I watched Matthew, Sarah, and a sleepy-looking Lucas approach the house, dragging their luggage from the tropical vacation I'd funded. Matthew reached for his key and inserted it into the lock. His confusion was evident when it didn't turn. He tried again, jiggling the handle and examining the key as if it might have been damaged. "It's not working," he said to Sarah, frustration clear in his voice. Sarah tried her own key with the same result. "Did she change the locks?" she asked incredulously. Matthew pulled out his phone and dialed my number. I watched as he paced on the porch, waiting for me to answer. Of course, I let it go to voicemail. "Mom, we're home and our keys aren't working. Call me back right away," he said, his tone authoritative rather than concerned. Lucas, rubbing his eyes sleepily, pointed to the decorative box by the door. "Dad, what's that?" Sarah picked it up, her expression suspicious. "It's from your mother," she told Matthew after examining the tag with my handwriting. Matthew opened the package and Lucas peered inside. "There are lots of old pictures," the boy observed, pulling out a photo of Matthew and me at his high school graduation. "There's a letter," Matthew said, unfolding the pages I'd written. The camera captured his expression changing as he began reading aloud. "Dear Matthew, Sarah, and Lucas," he began. "By now, you've discovered that your keys no longer work for my home. This isn't a decision I made lightly, but after what happened with our Hawaii trip, I've realized our relationship needs significant changes." Sarah's face flushed with anger. "Is she serious? After everything we've done for her?" Matthew continued reading. When I arrived at the airport for the vacation I had paid for in full, I discovered that not only was I unwelcome, but that Sarah considers me this old man who would ruin your perfect family time. This revealed to me how you truly see me, not as a beloved family member, but as a financial resource to be used when convenient and discarded when not. Lucas looked up at his parents with confusion. "You told Grandma she couldn't come on vacation with us, but she paid for it." Matthew ignored his son's question and kept reading, his voice growing quieter. I have provided you with a fully furnished rental property at 1432 Maple Street. I've paid the first 3 months of rent to give you time to make alternative arrangements. All of your belongings that were stored in my home have been packed and will be delivered there tomorrow. Sarah's indignation turned to shock. She's kicking us out. She can't do that. Inside this package is the key to your temporary home, Matthew read, pulling out the tagged key I'd included. This isn't about punishment. It's about respect and boundaries. I've spent my life giving to you, Matthew, and I don't regret a moment of it. But I can no longer allow myself to be taken for granted or treated as an inconvenience. Matthew's expression had transformed from anger to what appeared to be shame as he continued to read my words aloud. His voice faltered slightly on certain passages, particularly when I recounted specific sacrifices I'd made over the years. Lucas tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, why didn't we take Grandma on vacation if she paid for it? That doesn't seem fair." Neither parent answered him. Matthew finished reading the letter in silence, then folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket. When he finally spoke, his voice was subdued. "We should go to the rental house. It's late and Lucas needs to sleep." As they gathered their luggage, Matthew tried calling me again. This time, I watched his face as he listened to my new voicemail greeting. "You've reached Claudette. I'm currently unavailable as I'm focusing on self-care. Please leave a message and I'll return your call if appropriate." They left my porch with the package, Lucas still asking questions that went unanswered. As their car pulled away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for the relationship that was changing, but also a profound sense of strength I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since Jack died, I had put myself first, and while it hurt, it also felt necessary and right. 2 weeks passed with no word from Matthew. I moved back into my home after that first night away and settled into a new routine focused on my own needs and interests. My painting class proved to be therapeutic, and I discovered a talent I never knew I had. The solitude I'd once dreaded became peaceful rather than lonely. On the 15th day, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Not an email or text, but a handwritten letter on quality stationery. I recognized Matthew's handwriting immediately. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. "Dear Mom," he began. "I've written this letter a dozen times trying to find the right words to express how deeply sorry I am for what happened. There is no excuse for how we treated you, how I allowed you to be treated, and how I've taken your generosity for granted for so long." His words continued across 3 pages, acknowledging specific instances where he had failed to show appreciation or respect. He admitted that Sarah had gradually influenced their family dynamics, but he took full responsibility for his own choices. "The rental house you provided is more than we deserve," he wrote. "Each night, I look at the photos you included and remember the mother who sacrificed everything for me. I'm ashamed of the man I've become, and I want to find my way back to being the son you raised me to be." The letter concluded with a request to meet and talk, not at my home, but at a neutral location where I would feel comfortable. He asked to come alone without Sarah and promised to respect whatever boundaries I needed. I sat with the letter for several days, processing my feelings. My therapist helped me distinguish between forgiveness and returning to old patterns. "You can forgive without allowing the same behavior to continue," she advised. "Reconciliation requires changed behavior, not just apologetic words." After careful consideration, I texted Matthew, suggesting we meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. When the day arrived, I dressed carefully, wanting to project the confidence I now felt. The woman who entered that cafe was not the same one who had been rejected at the airport 2 months earlier. Matthew was already waiting, looking tired and subdued. He stood when he saw me, his expression a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out my chair. Our conversation began awkwardly, but gradually gained momentum. Matthew spoke without defensiveness, admitting that he and Sarah had exploited my generosity for years. He confessed that Sarah had controlled much of their relationship with me, often scheduling conflicts when I asked to see Lucas or criticizing me when I wasn't present. "That doesn't excuse my behavior," he added quickly. "I'm an adult. I made my choices." When he described their return from Hawaii, I was surprised by his candor. "Lucas hasn't stopped asking about you. He was so upset when he understood what happened. He told us we were mean and that it wasn't fair. Children often see moral situations more clearly than adults, I observed. Matthew nodded, tears forming in his eyes. He asked me if this is how I would want him to treat me when I'm older. I had no answer for that. As our conversation progressed, Matthew asked if I would consider family counseling, not just him and me, but including Sarah and Lucas as well. Sarah's resistant, he admitted, but I've made it clear that our relationship with you is non-negotiable. Either she participates in rebuilding it or we'll have serious problems in our marriage. I considered his request carefully. I'm not opposed to counseling, I told him, but I need you to understand something. Words and promises mean little to me now. I need to see consistent changed behavior before I can fully trust again. That's fair, he agreed immediately. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just want the chance to earn back your trust. We parted with a tentative plan to meet again the following week. No hugs, no dramatic reconciliation, just a small step toward a new, healthier relationship. Over the subsequent months, I watched Matthew work to rebuild our relationship on more equal footing. He began repaying the vacation money in monthly installments despite my assurance that it wasn't necessary. It's not about the money, he explained. It's about showing you that I value what you've given me. Sarah initially remained distant, participating in family therapy sessions with obvious reluctance, but as she witnessed the changes in Matthew and saw how her behavior affected Lucas's relationship with me, she gradually softened. Our relationship would never be warm, but we developed a mutual respect that made family gatherings comfortable rather than tense. My relationship with Lucas flourished once the artificial barriers were removed. Matthew made sure I had regular time with my grandson, and those moments became precious to both of us. 6 months after the airport incident, Matthew surprised me with plane tickets, not to Hawaii, but to Arizona, where I'd always wanted to see the Grand Canyon. Just you and me, he said, a chance to reconnect the way we used to be. That trip healed something fundamental between us. As we stood at the edge of that magnificent canyon, Matthew took my hand and said, "Thank you for being brave enough to teach me what really matters." Learning to value myself taught my son to value me too. It wasn't easy, and the journey had painful moments, but standing up for myself ultimately saved our relationship rather than destroying it. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others is to love ourselves enough to demand respect. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who took you for granted? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about my journey towards self-respect and healing family relationships. And remember, it's never too late to teach others how to treat you with dignity. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength on your own path to healthy relationships.